The text message that changed everything arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Sunday night. "Mom, emergency. Melody's sister is in labor, and we need to drive to Salem immediately. Can you watch the twins from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. tomorrow? You're a lifesaver." What I discovered the next morning was that there was no emergency, no sister in labor, and my son Connor had actually paid our neighbor Mrs. Chen $100 to watch the same children just 3 days earlier while they attended a wine tasting event. I had been babysitting my grandchildren for free every weekend for 8 months, while my son was happily paying strangers for the exact same service. My name is Adrian Mills, and I'm 67 years old. I'm a retired veterinarian who spent 40 years running my own practice in Portland, Oregon, and I thought I understood the value of hard work, family loyalty, and mutual respect. I also thought I was being the kind of supportive grandmother that every young family needed, someone reliable, loving, and always available to help with childcare when money was tight and schedules were demanding. Let me tell you about my son Connor. He's 34 years old, works as a pharmaceutical sales representative, and makes what I considered to be a decent living selling medical equipment to hospitals and clinics throughout the Pacific Northwest. He's married to Melody, who's 32, and works part-time as a yoga instructor while trying to build her own wellness coaching business. Together they have 6-year-old twins, Emma and Oliver, who are absolutely the light of my life and the reason I agreed to help with babysitting in the first place. When Connor first approached me about providing regular childcare, it was presented as a temporary arrangement to help them through a difficult financial period. Connor explained that Melody's business was just getting started and wasn't generating much income yet, that his job required occasional weekend travel and evening events, and that they were struggling to afford reliable childcare for the twins. As their grandmother, I was more than happy to step in and help. "Mom, you would be saving our lives," Connor had said during that initial conversation 8 months ago. "Professional childcare costs are astronomical, and we just can't afford to pay someone else when we're trying to get Melody's business off the ground. The twins love spending time with you, and it would mean everything to us if you could help out on weekends." I was touched that they trusted me with Emma and Oliver, and I genuinely enjoyed spending time with my grandchildren. The twins are bright, energetic kids who love stories, games, and outdoor adventures. I looked forward to our weekend activities, trips to the zoo, baking sessions in my kitchen, art projects that would keep them busy for hours, and nature walks around the beautiful parks in Portland. What started as occasional weekend, babysitting quickly became a regular commitment every Saturday and Sunday from early morning until late evening. Connor and Melody would drop off the twins around 7 a.m. and pick them up around 9 p.m., giving them nearly 14 hours of free time every weekend while I provided full-time childcare without any compensation. I never asked for payment because I thought I was helping family members who were genuinely struggling financially. I believed that Connor and Melody were making sacrifices in other areas of their lives and that my free babysitting was helping them build a stable future for their children. I felt proud to be contributing to their success and happy to play such an important role in my grandchildren's lives. My best friend Janet Rodriguez, who's a retired social worker, had occasionally suggested that Connor and Melody might be taking advantage of my generosity. "Adrian, 14 hours of childcare every weekend is like having a part-time job," she would tell me. "Even if they can't afford to pay you much, they should at least acknowledge the value of what you're providing." But I always defended Connor and Melody, insisting that they were good parents who were working hard to build better lives for their family. I told Janet that helping my son and daughter-in-law was what grandmothers were supposed to do, and that I didn't need payment for spending time with children I loved. What I didn't know was that while I was providing free childcare every weekend, Connor was simultaneously paying other people substantial amounts of money for the exact same service during the week. To understand how devastating this betrayal felt, you need to know what my typical weekend routine had become and how much effort I was putting into caring for Emma and Oliver every Saturday and Sunday. This wasn't just casual grandparent time. I was providing professional-level childcare services for free while believing I was helping my son's family survive financially. Every Friday evening I would prepare my liberally dosed House for the twins' arrival. I kept a bedroom set up specifically for their weekend stays, with twin beds, toys, books, and activities that I purchased with my own money. I would plan elaborate meals and snacks, shop for groceries to accommodate their preferences and dietary restrictions, and research new activities to keep them entertained throughout the weekend. Saturdays typically began at 7 a.m., when Connor and Melody would drop off the children, often in a rush to get to their own activities. They would give me quick instructions about medications, meal times, or any special needs for the day, and then disappear until evening. I would spend the next 14 hours providing constant supervision, entertainment, and care for two energetic 6-year-olds. My weekend activities with Emma and Oliver were elaborate and expensive. I would take them to children's museums, local festivals, movie theaters, parks, and recreational centers around Portland. I paid for admission tickets, snacks, souvenirs, and any other expenses related to our outings. When we stayed home, I would organize art projects, baking sessions, science experiments, or gardening activities that required supplies I purchased myself. The twins had specific needs and preferences that I had learned to accommodate. Emma loved craft projects and required expensive art supplies for her elaborate creations. Oliver was fascinated by science and nature, so I bought books, microscopes, and educational toys to nurture his interests. Both children had dietary restrictions that required special foods and careful meal planning. During the week, I would often find myself shopping for items the twins would need for their weekend activities. I was spending hundreds of dollars per month on groceries, entertainment, supplies, and outings, all while providing free labor for what amounted to a full-time weekend job. What made this arrangement even more demanding was that Connor and Melody treated my babysitting like a professional service without the professional respect or compensation. They would change plans at the last minute, extend pickup times without warning, or add extra responsibilities like helping with homework, organizing the children's belongings, or dealing with behavioral issues. I started keeping a journal of our weekend activities, partly because I enjoyed documenting the fun times with my grandchildren, but also because I was beginning to feel overwhelmed by the scope of what I was providing. Looking back at those entries, I can see that I was working nearly 30 hours every weekend while spending significant amounts of my own money to ensure the children had enriching, educational, and enjoyable experiences. The most troubling pattern I noticed was how Connor and Melody had begun taking my availability for granted. They would make weekend plans, assuming I would be available for childcare, without asking in advance or checking whether I had other commitments. They would mention dinner reservations, concert tickets, or weekend trips, as if my babysitting was automatically included in their social calendar. When I occasionally mentioned that I might not be available for a weekend due to my own plans or commitments, Connor would become visibly stressed, and Melody would make comments about how difficult it was to find reliable childcare on short notice. They never suggested hiring a professional babysitter or adjusting their own plans. The expectation was always that I would rearrange my schedule to accommodate their needs. I also noticed that they rarely asked about my own well-being or acknowledged the effort I was putting into caring for their children. They would pick up Emma and Oliver on Sunday evenings and immediately focus on getting them home for baths and bedtime without showing interest in what we had done together or expressing appreciation for my time and energy. My friend Janet continued to express concern about the arrangement, particularly when she saw how tired I was becoming and how much of my own money I was spending on activities and supplies for the twins. "Adrian, you're providing the level of care that professional nannies charge $50 an hour for," she would tell me. "Even if Connor can't afford to pay you that much, he should at least be covering the expenses for activities and food." But I continued to defend the arrangement, believing that I was making a meaningful contribution to my family's success and happiness. The breaking point in our arrangement came during a particularly demanding 3-week period in late summer when Connor and Melody seemed to lose all sense of boundaries regarding my time and availability. What had started as weekend babysitting gradually expanded into weeknight emergencies, last-minute requests, and demands that went far beyond anything I had originally agreed to provide. The first incident occurred on a Thursday evening when Connor called me at 8 p.m., clearly having been drinking, asking if I could quickly come over to watch the twins, because he and Melody wanted to extend their dinner date into a late-night bar crawl. When I explained that I had already gotten ready for bed and wasn't prepared to drive across town at that hour, Connor became frustrated and said, "Mom, we never ask you for anything during the week. Can't you help us out just this once?" The irony of never ask you for anything was staggering, given that I had been providing 14 hours of free childcare every single weekend for 8 months. But I ended up driving over to their house and staying until 2 a.m. because I didn't want Emma and Oliver to suffer because of their parents' poor planning. The second incident was even more problematic. Connor texted me on a Tuesday morning asking if I could pick up the twins from school and keep them overnight because he and Melody had decided to take a spontaneous trip to the Oregon coast. They had apparently booked a romantic getaway, without arranging childcare in advance, and expected me to drop everything to accommodate their impulsive vacation plans. When I explained that I had a doctor's appointment and other commitments that day, Connor responded with, "Mom, I thought family was supposed to support each other. We're going through a really stressful time with work and Melody's business, and we just need one night to reconnect as a couple." I ended up canceling my appointments and taking care of the twins for an unexpected overnight stay, which required rearranging my entire week and purchasing additional groceries and supplies on short notice. The third and most outrageous incident occurred the following weekend when Connor and Melody decided to extend their usual Saturday evening pickup time by several hours without any warning. They had gone to a friend's wedding and apparently decided to continue the celebration at various bars and clubs around Portland. I kept the twins until nearly midnight, feeding them dinner, helping with baths, and putting them to bed in my guest room. When Connor and Melody finally arrived to pick them up, they were clearly intoxicated and seemed annoyed that I mentioned how late it had gotten. "Mom, you're retired," Melody said dismissively. "It's not like you have to get up for work tomorrow. We so rarely get to have fun together, and you know how important it is for marriages to maintain romantic connections." That comment about my retirement particularly stung because it revealed how they viewed my time as unlimited and worthless because I wasn't earning a paycheck. The assumption that retired people have nothing better to do than provide free childcare on demand showed a fundamental lack of respect for my autonomy and personal life. The final straw came when Connor started making comments about my babysitting methods and suggesting that I needed to be more structured in my approach to caring for the twins. During one pickup conversation, he criticized the comments activities I had planned for the day and suggested that I should be doing more educational work with the children rather than just playing around. "Mom, Emma and Oliver need more academic stimulation," Connor said after a weekend where I had taken them to a hands-on science museum and helped them build elaborate art projects. "Maybe you could work on their reading skills or math concepts instead of just doing crafts and games." I was stunned by this criticism given that I was already providing free childcare, paying for all activities and supplies, and spending considerable time and energy planning enriching experiences for the twins. The suggestion that I wasn't doing enough, or that my methods weren't sufficiently educational, felt like a slap in the face after months of dedicated service to their family. That night I called Janet and finally admitted that maybe she had been right about Connor and Melody taking advantage of my generosity. "I think they've stopped seeing me as a grandmother who's helping out and started seeing me as free labor that they can criticize and control," I told her. Janet's response was immediate and emphatic. "Adrian, you need to find out what they're paying other people for childcare and start charging them the same rate." Janet's suggestion that I research what Connor and Melody were paying other people for childcare seemed almost impossible to investigate, but fate intervened in the form of an accidental conversation that revealed everything I needed to know about how my son really valued my services. The revelation came on a Monday morning when I was working in my front garden and my neighbor, Mrs. Rose Chen, came over to chat. Rose is 55 years old, a retired elementary school teacher who lives 2 houses down from me, and we've been friendly neighbors for several years. She mentioned that she had been doing some occasional babysitting to earn extra income during her retirement. It's wonderful how much families are willing to pay for reliable childcare these days, Rose said as she admired my flower beds. I charged Connor and Melody $100 for just 3 hours last Tuesday evening, and they didn't even hesitate about the price. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Connor and Melody? I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. My son Connor? Oh yes, they needed someone to watch Emma and Oliver while they went to some wine tasting event, Rose continued, completely unaware of what she had just revealed. They said their usual babysitter wasn't available, and they were willing to pay premium rates for short-notice care. Those twins are delightful children, by the way. I managed to finish the conversation without revealing my shock, but as soon as Rose went back to her house, I sat down on my porch steps and tried to process what I had learned. Connor had paid our neighbor $100 for 3 hours of babysitting while expecting me to provide 14 hours of care every weekend for free. That evening I called Janet and told her about the conversation with Rose. Janet was furious on my behalf, but she also helped me understand the full scope of what had been happening. Adrian, let me do some math for you, Janet said. If Rose charged $100 for 3 hours, that's about $33 per hour. You're providing 14 hours of care every weekend, which would be worth over $460 at that rate. You've been doing this for 8 months, which means you've provided services worth approximately $15,000. The number was staggering. I had been giving Connor and Melody $15,000 worth of free childcare while they were perfectly willing to pay premium rates to other people for the same service. But what hurt even more than the money was the realization that Connor had lied to me about their financial situation. If they could afford to pay Rose $100 for 3 hours of emergency babysitting, they weren't struggling to make ends meet the way Connor had claimed when he first asked for my help. I decided to do some additional investigation before confronting Connor about what I had discovered. Over the next few days, I paid closer attention to their social media posts, their conversations about weekend activities, and any clues about their actual financial status. What I found was evidence of a lifestyle that didn't match Connor's claims about financial hardship. Their Instagram accounts showed frequent expensive dinners, concert tickets, weekend trips, designer clothes, and other purchases that suggested they had plenty of discretionary income. Melody's yoga business appeared to be more successful than Connor had let on, and his pharmaceutical sales job apparently provided bonuses and benefits that he hadn't mentioned. I also started keeping detailed records of everything I was spending on activities, food, and supplies for the exploded twins during our weekend visits. When I calculated the total, I realized I was spending nearly $300 per month of my own retirement income to subsidize their free childcare. The breaking point came the following Friday, when Connor called to ask if I could watch the twins for an extra day because he and Melody wanted to extend their weekend getaway to include Monday. The casual assumption that I would be available, combined with everything I had learned about their willingness to pay other people for the same service, finally pushed me to take action. Connor, I need to talk to you and Melody before this weekend, I said. Can you both come over tomorrow morning? There are some things about our babysitting arrangement that we need to discuss. Mom, is everything okay? Connor asked, probably hearing something different in my voice. Everything will be fine, I replied. But it's time we had an honest conversation about the value of childcare. Saturday morning arrived, with Connor and Melody showing up at my house looking slightly confused but not particularly concerned about my request to talk. They probably expected a casual conversation about scheduling or maybe some minor issue with the twins' weekend routine. They had no idea that I was about to confront them with evidence of their hypocrisy and demand fundamental changes to our arrangement. Have a seat, I told them as they settled into my living room. I want to discuss the childcare services I've been providing and some things I've recently learned about your family's financial situation. Connor looked puzzled, but Melody immediately seemed to sense that this conversation might not go the way they expected. Mom, if this is about money, you know we appreciate everything you do for us, Connor said. We're just going through a tight period right now. Actually, Connor, this is exactly about money, I replied, pulling out a folder I had prepared with my research and calculations. Specifically, it's about the money you pay other people for childcare while expecting me to work for free. The room fell silent as both Connor and Melody realized what direction this conversation was heading. Connor started to speak, but I held up my hand and continued. Last week, I had an interesting conversation with our neighbor Rose Chen. She mentioned that you paid her $100 to watch Emma and Oliver for 3 hours while you attended a wine tasting event. Is that accurate? Connor's face turned red, and he started to stammer out an explanation. Mom, that was an emergency situation. Rose was the only person available on short notice. An emergency wine tasting? I asked calmly. Connor, I've been providing 14 hours of childcare every weekend for 8 months. At the same hourly rate you paid Rose, my services have been worth over $15,000. Melody finally spoke up, her voice defensive and slightly angry. Adrian, it's not the same thing. You're their grandmother. Family helps family. We can't afford to pay professional rates for regular childcare. But you can afford to pay professional rates when it's convenient for your social calendar? I replied. Melody, I've been tracking my expenses for activities, food, and supplies for the twins. I'm spending nearly $300 per month of my retirement income to subsidize your free childcare. Meanwhile, your social media shows expensive dinners, concert tickets, and weekend trips that suggest money isn't as tight as Connor claimed. I opened my folder and showed them the detailed calculations I had prepared. I've documented every weekend, every expense, and every hour of care I've provided. If I charged you the same rate you willingly pay Rose Chen, you would owe me for past services. But going forward, if you want me to continue providing childcare, you'll pay me the same rate you pay everyone else. Connor looked shocked and hurt. Mom, I can't believe you're making this about money. I thought you enjoyed spending time with Emma and Oliver. I do enjoy spending time with my grandchildren, I said firmly. But I don't enjoy being lied to about your financial situation, taken for granted, criticized for my methods, and treated like free labor instead of a family member whose time and effort have value. I pulled out printed screenshots of their social media posts showing expensive activities and purchases. Connor, you told me you were struggling financially and couldn't afford childcare. But here's evidence of a $100 dinner last month, concert tickets that cost at least $75 each, and a weekend trip to wine country that clearly wasn't cheap. The fact that you're willing to pay Rose Chen premium rates for emergency babysitting proves that you understand the value of childcare. I continued. The fact that you expect me to provide the same service for free while spending my own money on activities and expenses proves that you don't value my contribution to your family. Melody tried a different approach. Adrian, we never asked you to spend your own money on activities. You chose to do that because you wanted to spoil the grandchildren. And you chose to let me subsidize your social life while lying about your ability to pay for childcare, I replied. From now on, if you want me to watch Emma and Oliver, you'll pay me $50 per hour, which is actually less than you paid Rose. You'll also reimburse me for any expenses related to activities, food, or supplies. Connor stood up, clearly angry. This is ridiculous. You're turning family time into a business transaction. No, Connor, I said calmly. You turned it into a business transaction when you decided my time was worthless while other people's time was worth paying for. The aftermath of that confrontation was initially tense and uncomfortable, but it ultimately led to the healthier relationship with my son and his family that I should have demanded from the beginning. Connor and Melody left my house that morning angry and defensive, but they also knew that I was absolutely right about the unfairness of our previous arrangement. For the first week after our conversation, Connor didn't contact me at all. I think he was hoping that I would back down from my demands and return to providing free childcare rather than risk losing access to my grandchildren. But I had made my decision and was prepared to stick to my boundaries, even if it meant temporary strain in our relationship. Melody called me on Thursday of that week, trying a different approach. "Adrian, I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said. "We never meant to take advantage of you. We just thought you enjoyed spending time with the twins, and that helping us was something you wanted to do. I do enjoy spending time with Emma and Oliver, and I do want to help your family," I replied. "But helping doesn't mean working for free while you pay other people for the same service. If my time and effort have value when Rose Chen provides them, they have value when I provide them too." The breakthrough came the following weekend when Connor finally called to ask if I would watch the twins, but this time he immediately offered to pay my requested rate without any argument. "Mom, you're right about everything," he said. "We were taking advantage of your generosity, and that wasn't fair to you. If you're still willing to babysit, we'll pay you $50 per hour and cover all expenses for activities." That weekend was different from all the others in the best possible way. Connor and Melody dropped off the twins with a detailed list of emergency contacts, specific instructions about meals and activities, and an envelope with payment for my services, plus extra money for any expenses that might come up during the day. They also asked about my availability for the following weekend, instead of assuming I would be free. Most importantly, when they picked up Emma and Oliver that evening, they asked about our day, looked at the art projects we had created, and genuinely thanked me for the care and attention I had provided. For the first time in months, I felt like they saw me as a professional providing valuable services rather than a free resource they could exploit. The financial compensation made a significant difference in my attitude toward babysitting, but the real change was in how Connor and Melody treated me and my time. They started planning their social activities in advance and asking about my availability rather than assuming I would always be free. They began contributing ideas for activities with the twins and offering to pay for special outings or experiences. Most importantly, they stopped making last-minute demands and began respecting my personal schedule and commitments. My relationship with Emma and Oliver didn't change at all. They were still delighted to spend weekends with their grandmother, and I continued to love our time together. But now I was able to enjoy that time without feeling resentful about being taken advantage of or worried about the financial burden of providing expensive activities on my retirement budget. Janet was thrilled with how I had handled the situation. "You taught Connor and Melody an important lesson about valuing family contributions," she told me. "But more importantly, you stood up for yourself and demanded the respect you deserve." The most valuable outcome was that Connor seemed to develop a better understanding of the effort and expense involved in quality childcare. He started making comments about how much work it was to keep the twins entertained and educated, and he gained new appreciation for the planning and energy required to provide enriching weekend experiences. 6 months later, our arrangement is working beautifully. Connor and Melody pay me fairly for babysitting services, reimburse me for all expenses, and treat me with the respect and consideration that any professional caregiver would receive. I continue to love spending time with my grandchildren, but now I do it without feeling exploited or taken for granted. The lesson I learned is that family relationships require mutual respect and fair treatment, even when love is involved. Allowing someone to exploit your generosity doesn't help them or you. It creates resentment and damages the relationship over time. Standing up for yourself and demanding fair treatment actually strengthens family bonds by ensuring that everyone's contributions are valued and respected.